Hi, Roy here on my channel Roy Reads Anything and in my Garbaugust headquarters. So Garbaugust is a reading event. It's a month of reading trashy books and watching trashy movies, devised by Criminally, with co-hosts and prompts and all the fun of the fair, linked to down below. And when I made my Victorian trash video, to get a sort of starting point, I did a search on the phrase trashy books in British Newspaper Archive, which is a database of millions of pages of the press from this country going back to the 18th century. I thought it might be interesting to do the same thing decade by decade for the 20th century, not as any kind of serious research, but just to get a sense of what trashy books meant, or what people were saying about trashy books and related issues in those times. So for instance, back in 1909, in the Northern Daily Telegraph, an article, "Trashy Books, a Tilt at Popular Tastes. Advice to a YMCA Rally at Bispham." So this was a Lancashire rally of the Young Men's Christian Association, quite near here actually.
I've been to Bispham.
Yeah, yes, where that pub is, the Eagle and Child.
Oh yeah, it's only up the road.
Yeah.
Do nice food at the Eagle there.
Well, they used to. Who knows? Haven't been there for
Well, that's true.
a long time. Mr. Lewis Peyton, Mr. J. Lewis Peyton, High Master of the Manchester Grammar School, delivered an address concerning reading and literature. He said that schoolmasters had not succeeded in giving to the rising generation that bias towards better things, which made reading a blessing to them rather than a curse. A poisonous literature had grown up, which was disqualifying for the most sacred duties of life. The other day he found in his school a literary rag, over which, if the law had been as it should have been, would have been printed in red ink the word poison. I would read that rag.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd want to read it more, but
Yeah.
he asked the boy who had it how he came to be in possession of it. He said he had picked it up in a train. Someone had evidently bought the trash to feed his own prurient desires, and then left it in the train, there to propagate its seeds of evil. That reminds me, the Garbology anthology is now available on Amazon.
Should have
Seeds of
poison
Evil.
printed on the cover in red.
It should. It's got a zombie with an eye in its mouth.
True. Nearly as good.
Seeds of Evil.
Seeds
What
of
they were
evil.
constantly putting in their minds by reading necessarily fed their characters and made them what they were. "Tell me," said Mr. Peyton, "what a man reads, and I will tell you what the man is." He divided books into two classes, the uphill books and the downhill books. Let them read the uphill books, those works which, once understood, make for manhood. So, trashy books, not making for manhood by the sound of it. Moving forward into the 1910s, now we're getting a bit more of what we had in Victorian times, where if you search for trashy books you actually find crime reports of typically young men, boys who've been led astray by their reading of such literature. Mr. R.A. Young, for the defence, then stated facts which were surprising. Several other charges, he said, were hanging over the lad's head. He'd been in the employ of Mr. William Fox of Long Eaton, but was dissatisfied with his work and had a desire to go to Australia. The lad had been reading literature of a pernicious type, such as Deadwood Dick, Buffalo Bill and Jack Sheppard. One of his education and upbringing should have had more sense than to read such trash. There was no doubt that the reading of such literature caused him to have an ambition to go to Australia. So, symptoms to watch for.
And he got dreams of being a convict. Because I think they'd stopped deporting people.
He didn't
to
know
Australia.
whether he was going out to be out on a private ship and to be a bush ranger or become a hard-working sheep farmer. The lad did not have sufficient funds, hence the crime, you see. And that was in the Evening Standard in 1912. So watch out for those urges towards Australia. Another master criminal, lad who gagged and handcuffed himself.
What?
When Walter Tennant, an office boy of 15, was charged with stealing £2 and 10 shillings from his employer, the magistrate in the Clerkenwell Children's Court was informed that the lad was found by his master in the office, apparently gagged and roped. His hands were handcuffed behind him, and he was just that moment wriggling out of his bonds. The boy told his master that when he arrived at the office, a man gagged and bound him and afterwards robbed the office. On being questioned by a detective, the boy produced a new postal order for £2 and 5 shillings and a piece of paper on which was printed "The Handcuff Trick." And he admitted that he bound and gagged himself. He bought the handcuffs and bought the postal order with the rest of the money. The parents of the lad, most respectable people, and the employers gave him a high character, as did the school authorities. He left in the 7th standard. The parents could not account for his action. He had a good home. The detective said the boy told him that it was through penny bloods and produced a bundle of periodicals. Father said that the boy had a good library at home and need not buy trash. Mr. Bross said it was a waste of good education if it only ended in reading rubbish. So don't waste your education. Boy was a good character. He would treat this as a foolish freak. There's a t-shirt. Foolish freak. Rather than a criminal offence, and accept the father's bail to bring up the boy if called on in the next 12 months. Okay, into the 20s, then the Nottingham Journal gives us an account. Headed Trashy Books, the Dean of Westminster is a little pessimistic about modern literature. He says there are certain classes of authors today who seem to think the only matter of interest at all is what is called the sex problem. At the opening of a library yesterday, he went on to say that one can hardly take up a book of common, ordinary fiction, excluding the better authors, read a couple of chapters without feeling it is a book which should not be lying about. It has always been a difficult matter to decide in what proportion the books by really first-class authors are read in preference to the productions of neurotic writers. It cannot be said that this is a new problem.
I think that's code for women, isn't it? Neurotic.
It might indeed be argued that in some instances the banned books of one generation are the classics of the next. Very true.
It's true.
Just now it would appear that the crime stories are the best sellers, and since they usually avoid sex problems, there can be no great objection to them from the Dean's point of view. Cheers, mate. Especially as the criminal is always vanquished and law and order invariably triumph. It is nevertheless desirable to encourage reading for the sake of knowledge. It's also desirable to make knowledge readable. That is the author's part. And around the same time, a couple of years earlier, Trashy Books, German Reichstag adopts bill to stop publication. The Obscene and Trashy Literature Bill. Obszöne und trashige Literatur. Been the subject of lively polemic throughout Germany, was adopted by the Reichstag yesterday by 250 votes to 158. After an animated debate and lively opposition, particularly on the part of the socialists and communists, who regard its adoption as a black day for German culture.
Well, them coming up, mateys.
Okay, yeah. Now, not all the criminals were men or boys. Leeds Mercury, 1930, talks about a girl who had attempted a fraud with a falsified letter. The girl told the magistrate she had been reading a book in which a girl wrote a similar letter and she had done it for a joke. Her mother said she took home trashy books. Inspector Stone said the girl had played truant from school for a week and spent the time in the public library.
Outrage!
She was a good scholar. So I'm not sure whether that's meant to be good or bad. To me it seems like, well...
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Kudos.
Obviously by this time, and I think it is a good thing, you couldn't name minors who were in court. But if they had, it would be interesting to find out what the rest of her life was like.
Yeah.
But we do not know. Then in 1935, back to the usual boy who reads trashy books, tuppenny bloods under his pillow. That's a 100% increase. This boy's trouble is due to the fact that he reads trashy books and goes to the pictures far too much, so technology has brought in the pictures as well. Oh dear, goes to the pictures. Right, now, A Voice of Sense. Now, we're in the 30s still, in the Kent and Sussex Courier. County librarian and trashy books. What those between 14 and 18 should read. Declaring that if given their choices, the majority of boys and girls read the most trashy kind of literature, the county librarian, Miss A.S. Cook, proffered advice on what those between the ages of 14 and 18 should be encouraged to read at the second of a course of lectures for workers in juvenile organisations. While children were at school, they were extraordinarily keen readers. When they left, they appeared to be between two worlds. I read that one. To get them on to something better than the stuff which they appeared to prefer must be a gradual process. Now, yes, she's saying trashy literature bad, and we might think, oh, that's like censorship. But at least she's got a programme that isn't just ban this filth. From Wild West tales, it was not far to pioneering stories and so on to discovery. While from lurid shake romances, they might progress to the African stories of Rider Haggard and Kathleen Rhodes. And then to Egyptian history. Okay, maybe a bit optimistic there. It was important that the club leader in giving advice on books should not appear to be superior. So she's also recommends some books about reading that you might want to read. But this is where it seems to make sense to me. Now, I've looked up this woman and I've got a lot of time for her. She took over the role of county librarian when it was new, set it up from starting with empty rooms. She had to catalogue the books herself, introduce lots of cool innovations like mobile library via vans going around to the rural areas.
Oh my gosh.
So, just stick with me. For boys reading, Miss Cook advised, first, adventure and historical novels by such writers as John Buchan, Sapper, H.C. Bailey, Hilaire Belloc, G.K. Chesterton, Ralph Connor, Conan Doyle, as popular as ever, Geoffrey Farnell, Rider Haggard, Maurice Hewlett, the Scarlet Pimpernel series, Sabatini, and, for the pure fun of everything, P.J. Woodhouse. See, that seems good to me.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, if you like adventure stories, well, here's some better written ones.
Yeah,
And the next step was a little difficult. Included Conrad, Kipling, Masefield, and H.G. Wells.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend Conrad.
And then she brings in Hugh Walpole of Rogue July fame.
No, don't make
Certainly one of the most likely to live of modern authors. Yes, so at least there's a plan. But it's still like, the problem is the trashy reading. We move on, 1940. Here's another angle might not have thought of. Trashy books read by servants. Speaking on parental responsibilities in regard to sex teaching, the Reverend J.H.C. Mawson, Vicar of St Paul's, Worcester, at yesterday's Malvern Branch annual meeting of the Worcester Diocesan Association for Moral Welfare, said that the question must be treated sympathetically and sensibly and not sloppily or emotionally. It's fair enough. A member of the audience deplored the trashy literature read by many young servant girls on Sundays and weekdays when dinner is washed up or before they go to bed. He urged that mistresses should go down to the kitchen and advise their servants on the value of good reading as an aid to a healthy mind. So we'll do that.
Well, yeah. I'm going off to tell the servants right now.
Moving into the
Stop reading
into the
that
shifty
rubbish.
50s, women to fight trashy books, bad influence, waste of paper. Plans to clean up trashy books which lead young girls into a daydream world of millionaires and film stars are to be considered by the Education Committee of the 10,000 strong Warwickshire Federation of Women's Institutes. One of the ideas to be considered is a recommendation that supplies of paper to publishers of cheap novelettes should be reduced, particularly in view of the shortage which is curtailing the production of better class books.
Can I just say, was the turn away from boys towards girls as dangerous consumers of trash? Was that
Well, bear in mind
an obvious thing in
I'm
that?
only picking the story that comes up first, but it is kind of, broadly speaking, for boys trashy books equals crime. For girls it leads to unrealistic view of marriage.
Yeah.
The type of stories to which we object are not so much vicious as utter tripe. Mrs. T.M. Waldron told the Birmingham Gazette. They tell tales of the factory girl who marries the manager, the girl who suddenly becomes a film star who falls in love with a millionaire. Actually, that's
They all sound great.
Valley of the Dolls. They stultify the minds of the girls who read them and make them think they will always come out top dogs without having to do any work.
Oh,
They never develop their minds and educate themselves up to real life. These Cinderella novels are a waste of paper, and it's a pity there are so many of them when the books we really want are in short supply. Many of the girls' mothers read the novels without realising they're setting a poor example. They should try to give their daughters a taste of something better. Of course, Cinderella is one of the classic plots, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Here's another angle. Smoke problem for customs. The disposal of American paperback novelettes and glossy magazines seized by British customs is proving a problem. According to a statement issued yesterday, the customs have had to stop burning them as they cause black smoke in a smokeless zone, and they're now driven away under guard to be shredded. Under guard!
God!
The statement was issued at a press conference of the London Committee Against Obscenity, who announced a new drive to suppress trashy books and magazines.
I'm already formulating a film plot of a heist of trashy books.
Well, listen to this. They say that in the past 3 years, British Customs have seized 826,454 American novelettes.
Holy heck fire.
Why? I bet some of them found their way.
Yeah. I doubt all of those went to the pulpers.
328,000 magazines. Interesting clash of things, Obscene books, must burn them. But smokeless zones, what do we do? Get the guards. Moving into the 70s. Now, it's slim pickings now because trashy books isn't really a general term as it has been in the previous decades. It's become something people might say about very specific books like muckraking biographies. But Castle Drogo, a National Trust property, there's in a press story about how the National Trust had taken over Castle Drogo, which sounds like something from Tolkien, but it was actually it was like a fake castle built in the 30s.
19th century industrialist, 20th century industrialist.
Yeah, intriguingly, contains some exceptionally trashy books bound in exquisite volumes. So this industrialist bloke who built a fantasy castle seemed to be a fan of the trashy books, so we'll have to go back. And then another 70s thing, Irene Handel.
Yes.
Whom
God preserve of Utrecht.
Great character actor. Also wrote some novels, and particularly her first novel is called The Sioux, and apparently it's really good. She's being interviewed about her writing. Somebody, of course, people would have bought it thinking, oh, lovely Irene Handel, and the fact that it's like a serious book might have thrown them a bit. One wrote to Longman, the publisher, and said the book and its publishers should be publicly burned. Not that there's anything risque in it by today's standards.
Bit strong.
In fact, when I started my second novel, the publisher said a little bit of the usual you-know-what here and there might help the sales.
There's your father.
Well, I wasn't having that, of course. It's funny, isn't it, how in Victorian times a trashy book would be put out as if it was of high quality, whereas now the reverse happens. We're all falling over ourselves to make a quality novel look like pornography. Just shows the state we're in. Miss Handel removed a dog from my lap where it was trying unsuccessfully to bury a chocolate, and pondered on the peculiarities of the publishing industry. She can easily prove her point by demonstrating what happened to the Sue in paperback. It appeared with a garish cover depicting a lady with two bourgeois on a lead and a sinister dark man behind, obviously a fully paid up member of the mafia. The dark man, Armand Benoit in the story, is far from being a villain, and there are no bourgeois in the book. Not content with that, the paperback boys have retitled new editions of the book The Green and Purple Dream.
Blimey.
Okay, yeah. And
Are they bourgeois?
bourgeois, yeah.
The dogs?
Yeah.
Yeah, not bourgeois.
No.
Bourgeois.
Moving into the
Big
80s,
dogs.
again, people don't talk much about trashy books anymore. But a biography of Jacqueline Suzanne came out, the author of Valley of the Dolls. She died quite a long time before. She died really young, but she's back in the news because of this biography. Valley of the Dolls was an astonishing success. The day is over, said Jackie, when the point of writing is to turn a phrase the critics will quote. One critic commented that compared to Jackie Suzanne, Harold Robbins writes like Proust. When asked why she wrote such a trashy book, Jackie replied, way back, they didn't think Shakespeare was a good writer. They called Zola a bad writer. Everything changes in writing. I think James Joyce is a bore. And there was another thing happened. On the David Frost show on television, there was another guest called John Simon, who was a famously acerbic critic, who said to her face, do you think you're writing art, or are you writing trash to make a lot of money? To which she replied, little man, I'm telling a story.
Nice one.
Now, does that make you happy?
Like it.
Then, finally, in the 90s, a story headed Brought to Book about a scheme in a school. In the high-tech age of TV, computer games and the internet, pupils at one Bristol school are being given a sugar-coated incentive to switch their attentions back to reading classic and good quality books. I'm not sure Miss Cook from back in the would have been doing this. A new scheme at Cotham Grammar School means youngsters can collect 50p worth of sweets or school equipment such as pens for every 5 books they read off an approved list compiled by teachers. The real bookworms, those who would qualify for more than £3 worth of chocolates, will instead be given a book token. Staff hope the incentive will turn pupils' attention away from computer games and magazines. Growing concern has been expressed about the astonishing popularity of poor quality novels for children and teenagers. Particular concern has been voiced over the astonishing success of, see if you can guess what this is going to be, 1997, the Point Horror series of titles. These American-based horror novels are among the most popular with teenagers. Many educationalists claim these trashy books are poorly written and the gruesome contents unsuitable for impressionable readers. Not much different from stuff from like 100 years before or now. Nonetheless, no one can doubt the ability of point horror to get children and teenagers reading. The bestsellers list of teenage books at Waterstones reveal that point horror books take up half the top 20. So, yes, chocolate, sponsored by industry. As well as the point horror books, there are other American pulp novels which have proved very popular with teenagers, but are a source of concern for teachers. Among these are the Sun Valley High series of novels. Fact checker, do your job. Sweet Valley High is what you mean.
Yeah.
Which told the life.
It sounded vaguely familiar.
Yeah, Sun Valley Raisins. A high school in the USA. Point Baddie written. Yes, so this was quite a well done article though, because they then interviewed a bunch of kids. So, about what they thought of it. Ruth Loeffler, aged 15, said it's patronising to be told what to read.
Yep.
I don't think pupils should be bribed to read books.
Nope.
One of the main reasons people don't want to read is they were forced to at school, and this is even worse. Bribing people to read is not a good idea. Whereas Sophie Alderson, aged 13, says, I think the new scheme will mean clever people will just get more money for reading the book. I like books that are up to date, not the old ones. A couple of the kids thought it was okay, but you know, it's generally speaking, they saw through that one, not surprisingly. So lots of similarities to earlier and later panics and purges. There you go, trashy books through the 20th century. Okay, quite a long one that. I'll be back soon with something else. Bye.